talking about robo-taxi company Waymo expanding their operations across all major cities in California. I first want to start off with a video. So, what do you guys see over here? Do you guys see anything particular in that video? Okay, check it out again.
A car with no driver.
Car with no driver, exactly. And you're right. The car has no driver. In this video, you can see a Waymo self-driving vehicle stop smoothly at a stop sign, let cars go, they have the right of way, and smoothly resume. This is impressive. This brings me to my essential question. Should robo-taxi company Waymo expand their operations across all major cities in California? I'll be answering that today. But first, let me give you guys what I'll be going over today. I'll be going over the technology, the history, Why Waymo, No Way Waymo, and my rebuttal. So first, I want to highlight a few things I'll be mentioning today. So the robo-taxi is basically in its name. It's a robot taxi. It's basically a taxi that isn't driven by a human. It's operating by itself using the software and technology that's provided. I also will be referring to AV. AV just stands for autonomous vehicle, and that's basically robo-taxi, just no human driving a car. And I also might refer to a Waymo driver. A Waymo driver isn't an actual person driving a Waymo, rather it's a software that drives a Waymo. So to go over technology, I want to go over what's on a Waymo 5th generation vehicle. I'll be going over the generations later, but I'm going to be particularly focusing on a 5th gen for now. So the Waymo has a LiDAR, and LiDAR just stands for light and detection range. And this camera helps us see around it. It's also composed of many radars and cameras around the vehicle. So you might be questioning, what does the LiDAR exactly see? Over here, I have what a LiDAR sees compared to what a human eye sees. You can see the LiDAR can detect human pedestrians that are on the sidewalk, cars near it, even trees. The person who sees trees. And humans, we see it too, but the LiDAR can see a lot. This is very powerful technology. I want to go over to 5 levels of autonomy. There's actually 6, but it goes up to level 5. So level 0 would be a older car. Would be like a car that has no autonomous features. While a level 1 might have cruise control or lane assist, which is most newer cars today. Level 2 is where Tesla operates as, and level 2 has cruise control and lane positioning. And level 3 is where that it's kind of limited in self-driving. Like, it'll self-drive for you in certain environments, but you might need to take control if needed. And that's what hasn't been deployed yet publicly for consumers to own. However, level 4 is where Waymo operates as. Level 4 is where human intervention might be needed if in very rare occurrences. And level 5 hasn't been open for public use yet. However, Waymo is testing this technology with a car I'll be introducing later in this presentation that has no steering wheel. I also want to talk about how, since Waymo does operate at level 4 right now, there might be needing human intervention. And so this is where Waymo closely works with first responders in case of emergencies. They have a video posted on their website, and they do in-person training to first responders just in case if an occurrence happens where they need to take control of the vehicle. I want to go over the generations of Waymo vehicles, because earlier I was referring to the 5th generation. So how did Waymo first all start out? This all started out as a Stanford club, like a club in Stanford. It was a self-driving racing club. And from this club, they hired people who were part of the club, members, and then they formed the Google Self-Driving Car Project. With the Google Self-Driving Car Project, this was only testing. They didn't operate as a public service. They were testing out autonomous driving by attaching LiDARs on top of Priuses and driving them around on private roads. Which brought us to level 2, or not level 2, but generation 2, the 2nd generation. With the 2nd generation, the Waymo wasn't called Waymo back then, still part of the Google self-driving car project and part of the Stanford Club, where they would just basically advance the LiDAR, advance the software, and just attach it onto another car that isn't a Prius. That was it. But they didn't want this complex Google self-driving car project Stanford Club to just keep on going. So there it was born, Waymo. In the third generation Waymo vehicle, we see them establish a name for themselves, a brand for themselves. And with this third generation Waymo, they accomplished a lot. First of all, they started testing these vehicles out in San Francisco, California, and in Phoenix, Arizona, where they mapped out and they checked what this vehicle does inside public environments. And with this car, they basically attached the LiDAR onto a Chrysler Pacifica. In the fourth generation Waymo vehicle, they put a LiDAR on top of a Lexus, and this was never used for public use, that one as well, never used for public use yet. This was only meant for testing as well, where they tested this in Phoenix, Arizona, mapping and just testing to see how it works. However, and with the fifth generation Waymo vehicle in 2018, this was born, then they started opening up for public use. It was mostly an invite only in Phoenix, Arizona, and they used this vehicle, and they still do till this day. But what's for the future generations? Waymo is working on a sixth generation vehicle that is still testing, making sure it works properly. And there's two versions of the sixth generation vehicle. The first would be a Zeekr vehicle, and Zeekr is basically a vehicle brand from China. However, this vehicle comes with no software from China. So this is all Waymo. Waymo is focused on software, and Zeekr is focused on the vehicle in general. And to save costs, because the current model they use right now is a Jaguar I-Pace, an expensive car, they switched out to a Honda in order to save money in expenses for the vehicle. And this is good for trips. But this is where Waymo first starts to expand inside California. In California, in San Francisco, they start off as an invite only, letting users join a wait list, and when they're off the wait list, they can download the app and basically take a ride. They started invite only in Los Angeles and San Francisco before publicly deploying for all users. So now you can just download an app and just take a ride. In these areas, San Francisco, Daly City, close to us, and in the Los Angeles area. And as of recently, just a few weeks ago, they just added Silicon Valley. So in Mountain View, Palo Alto, Los Altos, you can hail a ride. And they're also mapping out San Diego. And this was a post that they posted on their social media, road trip to San Diego, testing out there. They serve over 200,000 rides per week. So many people use this as a form of transportation. But today I'll be focusing on Waymo 1. So there's two types of Waymo services. There's Waymo Via and Waymo 1. But in this slideshow, I'll be referring to the rideshare service, which is Waymo 1. Waymo Via was created as a trucking autonomous vehicle. However, it seems like they discontinued that because the last update on that was in 2022. Right now, they're generally focused on the Waymo 1, which they're making updates to this day. I also want to go over the competitors of Waymo. In this slideshow, I'm obviously going to talk about Waymo, not all self-driving cars, but I want to talk about competitors. So General Motors has their own self-driving car, or well, they actually used to. They paused service at a certain time, but they discontinued. With Cruise General Motors, this company, an incident happened in 2023, which caused them to pause all operations and think about how they can test their vehicles and change and maybe come back. But as of recently, literally a month ago, they said that they're gonna discontinue all operations. Also, Amazon has their own self-driving car, which is a Zoox. You might have seen one being publicly tested in San Francisco. They aren't open for rideshare hail yet, but you can see one out in the public if they're testing in San Francisco, and in Las Vegas as well. That's one place they're testing. But Amazon Zoox is still in the works, and not too certain about that. Apple discontinued and moved on to just focusing on phones and computers. And Uber, they decided to just stop completely and partner up with Waymo. Since fleet management's a high cost for Waymo, Uber is going to take care of that in places such as Atlanta, Georgia, and Austin, Texas. What this means is that users can hail an app or hail a Waymo through the Uber app instead of the Waymo app directly. But they stopped in 2020 because of an incident that happened. I also want to mention that the DMV allows Waymo and other self-driving cars to operate across the entire state of California. So this isn't just limited to a specific territory like a county or like a city. It's the whole state they're permitted to work. And I also want to mention that Waymos are allowed on the highway, going up to 65 miles per hour, and they can operate in light fog and in rain. I also want to mention that there is a camera in the Waymo vehicle. However, it isn't spying, or Google doesn't claim that they're spying on you. However, it is always recording just to ensure passenger safety and to ensure the ride goes smoothly. So, this brings me back to my essential question. Should robotaxi company Waymo expand their operations across all major cities in California? And to that, I say yes. This company should expand its operations across all major cities in California. And I'll be going over my reasons. So, I want to first start off with my first reason, and this is that it will decrease accidents. So right over here, I have these statistics from Waymo themselves. This is from the first 50 million miles of Waymo, and this is all the data they've composed of. This is compared to what a human would drive in the same radius compared to a Waymo robotaxi. And with that, we could see that there's 83% fewer airbag deployment crashes, which is a big statistic. And this number keeps going down and down. As Mr. Levin was saying, I've been researching this for a year, and when I saw that it was in 33 million miles, I've seen 22 million miles, and the numbers keeps on going down and down. This isn't 100% because when there's testing, there was a few crashes. I also want to mention that 94% of traffic crashes are related to human choice or error. That could be texting, that could be even drinking while intoxicated or drunk. I mean, how many of you guys have been in Uber where the guy was texting or maybe calling? That could be a distraction. I also want to mention a specific study that was done by Dr. John Scanlon, who he's a safety researcher at Waymo and his team, and they basically took what-if scenarios, they took real-life crashes, and they basically replaced the human drivers with Waymo robotaxis. And the results were impressive. The Waymo robotaxi was able to avoid 100% of the collisions. This shows how, this basically shows how the Waymo One vehicle is able to avoid crashes. And I also want to mention back, go to the Uber safety report for the year 2019-2020. And what's really crazy about this is that their victims, 64% of them who were victims in these crashes were pedestrians, and 29% were motorcyclists, 7% bicyclists. So Waymo aims to make the roads safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. And 101 deaths from Waymo, this could be reduced, or 101 deaths with Uber, this could be reduced with Waymo. Which brings me on to my second reason. Waymo could increase the freedom for the vulnerable population, so people with wheelchairs, people with disabilities. But today I'll be focusing on the wheelchair. And the reason I bring back the 6th generation vehicle is because not only is it safer because it has 4 LiDARs, 6 radars, and 13 cameras, but also because of how roomy it is. Easily someone with a wheelchair can get inside of there. But what you might question is that, like, why would this need to be autonomous? First, I want to mention that Waymo hasn't gone to autonomous yet. Right now, a human is driving the vehicle, and they basically offered this WAVE. WAVE stands for Wheelchair Accessible Vehicle. They offered this through the app. However, it's a human driving, not a robot. And as you can see, you just do it. You put Wheelchair Accessible Vehicle to come pick you up, and you can do it. But why would this need to be autonomous? And the answer is really dark but simple, and it's because of discrimination. So I want to share a story about this lady. Her name is Latillian Maxon. But before I share the story, I want to provide an interesting statistic. So according to ABC 7 News, as of 2023, half of the requests placed by wheelchair users to rideshare apps go unanswered. This means that if they do put in a request to get a Wave vehicle, it might not come picking up. And this was what happened to Miss Maxon over here. So Miss Maxon, she's been in a wheelchair for 3 years, and she wanted to go to the movie theater one day from her house. Going there was no problem. Going there was easy. However, her coming back was challenging. I mean, how long do you guys usually wait for Ubers? Like 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? 15 in like some circumstances. She had to wait 3 hours in order to get an Uber Wave vehicle to get her back home. Do you see how challenging that is? Do you see how inconvenient this is for her? And this is not just movie theaters. She had to miss work a few times because this Uber Wave service was inconsistent. And in some cases, paratransit isn't always available since you have to book 24 hours in advance in some cities. I also want to mention that Lyft was found guilty denying rides to people with wheelchairs through their own Wave service. And they actually had paid a $40,000 settlement. And I all got this from the California Department of Industrial Relations. This is what they got in the court case. I also want to mention that Waymo's expansion will bring economic growth to our cities. I want to first talk about insurance claims, insurance data. With Waymo, their bodily injury is 0. They haven't had to pay for anyone getting injured. So no one's gotten severely injured or any injury that needed an injury claim, right? They do have property damage, however, but this was due to early testing with the Waymo vehicles, which there might have been a few, or even if the Waymo vehicle was involved in accidents where Waymo wasn't at fault and it was another reckless human driver. However, the numbers, look at that, 3.26, 0.78. If this number is reduced, this will save for consumers because they won't have to pay a lot of money in insurance as well. So this is good for our economy, our own pockets as well. I also want to talk about Waymo being good for the traffic and how it can reduce traffic. So this research was done by this guy, his name was Dr. Dublijovic, and he's from North Carolina State, and he did some research and he figured out that these Waymo vehicles, robotaxis, they could reduce congestion in our cities, and they could lesser fuel consumption. And fuel consumption costs cities billions, and the environmental impact is also big on this too. And if we save money with gas, and we also could save money on finding solutions for saving our environment as well. And these Waymos, they can operate on highways, so expansion would just be one step forward to operating on highways today. I also want to mention, this is coming from Waymo, that Waymo is actually good for our tourist economy as well. Waymo 1 generated nearly $40 million for just additional economic activity within its first year. Their first year was in 2023 in San Francisco. So and they only operated for half that year in 2023. So maybe in 2024 it could be more. When those numbers come out, we could see it and we could tell how this could be good for our local economy, supporting our local businesses. I also want to go to my darkest and last reason. This is that Waymo robotaxis could stop sexual assault and reduce it by a great number. So 56 assaults happen in an Uber or Lyft vehicle each day. This is coming from Uber's own safety report, which said in 1 out of 500,000 rides, there is one sexual assault. In 1 out of 500,000. There's 26 million rides that happen each day around the world. 26 million in Uber, 2 million from Lyft. So that's 28 million. If 1 out of 500,000 and 56 mil, or in 28 million, that's 56 assaults a day. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. A survey was done surveying around 1,000 women on how they felt about Ubers, how they felt about Lyft, and this is what they said. They've said almost close to 50%, 42%, a woman reported that they have been sexually harassed by an Uber or Lyft driver. This is super concerning, super concerning. If 42% out of just 1,000 of this randomly selected group, and 35% reported that the driver had touched them and made them feel uncomfortable. And 12% of them reported that they were touched on a sexual body part. That's shocking. But what concerns women the most about using Uber and Lyft? The first one being drivers hitting on them or getting too personal, which could possibly happen. And the second one is drivers knowing where they live, because the driver's coming to go pick you up from your house, dropping you off somewhere. They might know that you're home alone. There's just so many circumstances where the driver could do negative stuff, bad stuff. Drivers also have too much personal information because they're literally picking you up from your house. And a whole bunch of stuff, such as inappropriate sexual behavior by drivers, getting into an accident, which will be reduced with Waymo because Waymo, their crash rates are lower. And it also being sexually assaulted by drivers, it's 29%. That's scary. And 56% did not report the incident. So that number 56 that I was talking about earlier could maybe even be closer to 100. Because in the 1 out of 500,000, those were only the ones reported. But 37% were reported to Uber or Lyft. But why not Waymo? So many fear that Waymo will replace jobs of Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, taxi drivers, and basically just take people out of their jobs, right? There's also circumstances where a Waymo does malfunction or block other vehicles. On the image on our left, this is a Waymo vehicle blocking the road, and this actually happened 7 months ago, where former Vice President Kamala Harris was coming to San Francisco, and her motorcade came through the downtown, and the Waymo vehicle didn't know what to do in the situation. So it just malfunctioned and did that. There's also a circumstance on the right where the Waymo vehicle goes on the wrong side of the road. This is a safety hazard. Why is it going on the wrong side of the road? This could hit another car going that way. I also want to talk about a quote that was said by our local supervisor, David Canepa of Daly City, District 5. So he said in a quote in this news article from ABC7, little notification, little transparency, and little outreach has been Waymo's strategy. This is a sneaky company trying to monopolize a market that's not for sale. This was said in 2024. And what he meant is that Waymo wasn't cooperatively working with our local police officers, firefighters, when they expanded into Daly City at first. They expanded into Daly City like August of 2024, to give you guys context. And they didn't give any notification to like police officers or firefighters that they're expanding. So they're left like wondering like, what can we do in this situation, because training hasn't been done yet. But this brings me to my rebuttal, listing all those counter arguments. Waymo, we shouldn't see this as eliminating jobs, but rather shifting people into new jobs. Because there is a whole list of new jobs that Waymo opens for us. That's fleet maintenance, remote supervision, cybersecurity, data analytics, customer support, vehicle cleaning, warehouse and logistics support, manufacturing and assembly, and the list goes on. But that's all I had for this slide. I also want to mention that the malfunction in blocks are very, very rare. And as technology continues to get better, we will see less malfunctions in roadblocks. I mean, you can even look up on your phone, Waymo malfunction or roadblock. You'd see the last one being in January 2025, but it wasn't a safety hazard. It was a Waymo vehicle that was circling around Phoenix Airport, not knowing where to stop. And so that isn't a safety hazard, and he could have just clicked end ride and it probably would have stopped and dropped him off at the airport. So that was just inconvenience in that sort of time. But Waymo also has been working with the government. I talked to interviewed two people notably. I interviewed 3, but 2 were very notable. One was David Canepa, who was the supervisor I talked and mentioned about earlier. And one was our county attorney, John Niblin. And they both mentioned how Waymo has been working with the government recently and coming up with a solution on how they could expand successfully in the San Mateo County. Not just Daly City, the whole San Mateo County, how they can make deals and how they can expand. And David Canepa, I talked to him in person just 1 week ago. And he told me when he said that quote in 2024, he had never taken a Waymo before. He told me now he's an avid Waymo user. Now he uses Waymo all the time. And he told me that the government is working really closely with Waymo on what they're trying to do in the next few months and ensure that the rollout is smooth. I also want to talk about how transparent they are with their data with riders. That data I was sharing with you guys earlier about the crash rates, that has always been publicly shared and easily accessible to all people as they post them on social media and on their website. Uber and Lyft don't have that. If you look that up on Uber and Lyft, it's very hard to find those statistics. They aren't that transparent about all their data. And if they are transparent, it is from like 2018 or 2020. So in conclusion, Waymo should expand its operations across California's major cities because this will decrease accidents, this will increase freedom for the vulnerable population, this will boost our local economy and economic growth for our state, and this will also stop and greatly reduce sexual assaults. Thank you.